knowing that we can't rely on these politicians. We can't be trying to work with these management companies. We know what they're about. But the only way things are really going to change is if people fight back and stand together. And we're so much stronger together.
Over the last few decades, all of the public housing in San Francisco has been eliminated through privatization via the federal HOPE 6 program and the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program. One by one, the San Francisco Housing Authority has handed over buildings to private management companies to rebuild and manage. But what's being built isn't public housing. HOPE SF is a scheme to eliminate the last of public housing in San Francisco. This is a plan for private developers to make a profit from building and managing mixed-income communities made up of market-rate units and supposedly affordable units. HOPE SF was created by former Mayor Gavin Newsom in 2007. It's a partnership between the City of San Francisco, along with the San Francisco Foundation, and community partners. One look at the HOPE SF website and it becomes clear who really benefits from it. Banks like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, corporations like Google, Kaiser Permanente, foundations, and the city government are all working together via the HOPE SF scheme to make a profit and push people out of their homes. This isn't for the tenants.
From what I understand, 30 some odd years ago, Housing Authority and these private companies knew that today would come and that they would buy out or get rid of us and rebuild. Whoever set up this deal that all these housing authorities and these projects was going to come tumbling down around the same time, it's all a setup. Don't go for it. It's all just another way. First thing to do, shake up where they live at. And we shake up where they live at, then we're going to create some real confusion. Let's see what they do next.
Para llevarnos a estos nuevos buildings donde los bancos son los únicos beneficiarios. Ellos no tienen en cuenta a la comunidad. Ellos solamente quieren lucrar con nosotros, adueñarse de lo que a ellos no les pertenece, porque las viviendas de housing de bajos ingresos no les pertenecen a los bancos, son de los ciudadanos, son de nosotros. Y ahora ellos quieren adueñarse. No, mi gente.
They're trying to push out everyone out of San Francisco at this point who isn't like a techie, or they're trying to gentrify even the projects, which I think is crazy. It just goes to show that they don't want like for low income people or people of color to stay in these areas, and they kind of want to build nicer buildings and have wealthier people to appeal to the neighborhood, and so that other wealthier people could come and settle down here at Potrero Hill. If for anyone who's been around here, outside of the projects, the houses are very nice.
Potrero Hill is spotted with many newer living spaces, including lofts, condos, and houses, some of which offer the best views of downtown San Francisco.
The whole neighborhood is nice, except for the projects, which is sectioned off by purpose a long time ago. They want people with, I guess, more money to come move in, essentially, when they build the better looking ones, to move in and kind of kick in the old residents out. They just want to make it so terrible that we basically want to move out.
These used to be serviceable, decent buildings, and they have let them fall apart. If the building is not maintained, eventually it will just collapse. They've got a lot of maintenance being done on these buildings they're demolishing. Now go figure.
This process is not new. We call it gentrification now, but before it was gentrification, it was called urban renewal. But they're basically the same thing. Tenants are kicked out and then priced out of their own neighborhoods. And surprise, surprise, it's also racist. And obviously classist.
Equality has always been this country's biggest issue. It doesn't know how to treat people of different classes, of different nationalities, of different economic backgrounds. Baby, believe me, anything to make you sick, keep you poor, keep you in the situation you're in, don't put it past them.
Now, before we talk more about how people in public housing have been treated, let's talk a little bit about why it exists, why it's important, and how it works. Public housing got its start towards the end of the Great Depression with the 1937 U.S. Housing Act. Shortly after, in 1938, the U.S. Housing Authority was established. Also in 1938, San Francisco established its very own housing authority. It began with Hawley Courts in 1940, but not long after, in 1941, they began developing Potrero Hill and Sunnydale. According to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, the purpose of public housing is to provide decent and safe rental housing for eligible low-income families, the elderly, and persons with disabilities. But just because someone is low income, elderly, or disabled doesn't mean they'll get a unit. People in need of housing can be on a wait list for years and years for seemingly no reason at all.
The Housing Authority a few years ago reopened their waiting list for homeless people. If you were homeless, in jail homeless, a program, it didn't matter. If you were any kind of homeless, get on the waiting list. We got units for you. So why are they still boarded up? Why aren't they being fixed so that somebody can move in? You temporarily fix it and make it look good enough for me to move in. Temporarily fix it and make it good enough for them to move in.
Public housing is far from perfect. It's even far from decent. But it's still life-changing for people in need of homes.
Okay, I lost my apartment because the rent went up and I could not afford it, so I had to move. And I was homeless for 9 months, I think. I used to call them every day, twice a day. And they did not understand why I did that, but my reason was they had a place to live and I did not. So I wanted to make sure that I touched bases with them every day to let them know I was still interested. Because people have told me they've been on that list for years.
The public housing list,
right?
Yeah.
No, pues la cosa es que cuando yo me vine a vivir aquí, como te vuelvo a repetir, fue a que fue por violencia doméstica y me salió este apartamento y pues yo vivía en un garage, yo vivía en un lugar pequeñito donde solo cabía mi cama, yo y mi hijo. Sí. Pero gracias a Dios di yo porque no me importó el lugar, ¿verdad? Y me vine, pero cuando yo vine aquí, pues no, me dijeron a mí, pues, bueno, me dijeron, te vamos a dar una unidad, era en la book me iban a dar, pero que después me salió aquí que habían dejado Entonces me vinieron a enseñar, pero así como están todo eso, así estaba la unidad toda sucia, toda sucia y toda arruinada, y bueno, yo tenía necesidad del apartamento, lo agarré. Pero cuando ya empezaron a fallar las cosas, yo empecé que quería que me arreglaran esto. Y yo decía, bueno, me lo van a arreglar porque tengo la calefacción, no sirve. Está mala. Entonces, y si uno les va a decir a ellos, no le mandan a nadie, no dicen ellos, vamos a arreglarle eso, vamos a reparar lo otro. Por eso les digo, yo vivía en un storage, digamos así, y yo pues vi la puerta abierta y dije, yo pues me voy, gracias a Dios me salió un apartamento y todo eso.
Got a regular life like everybody else. I'm just poor and want a place to live. And I don't think that having shelter is too much to ask. You know, I worked for years and I paid taxes. I'm not just a drain on society. And I hate it that they feel like I am.
Stigmatizing ideas like this are harmful to people in public housing and affect how they are treated by society as a whole. Attitudes like this are used to justify the housing authority's mistreatment of their tenants and the neglect of their tenants' homes.
There is mold that has been painted over. I have a mushroom growing into my wall from outside my house. The water is brown and tastes like... My door has been busted. This will be the 4th time my doorknob has come off. Look at my doorknob. Look at this. This is a beautiful doorknob. This is how secure my house is. That's how secure my house is. This is the 4th doorknob they done put on there. Lead paint? Are you serious? But I bet whoever approved the lead paint ain't got none in their house. But their kids ain't messing with it, playing with it, peeling it, eating it, or nothing else. And if they using lead paint, what else are they doing?
Y ellos aún así quieren imponer tantas leyes. A las familias mixtas les quieren cobrar más renta, que no se me hace justo también. Yo no soy familia mixta, pero me uno a ella porque hay personas de que tienen, ganan poquito y quieren que paguen más de lo que ellas ganan, y eso pues no se puede. Y tienen sus familias, sus niños, y pues uno tiene que ver cómo sobrevive.
And if that's not discrimination, who said that was okay? You didn't ask me. They didn't ask me. Can we charge your neighbor more than we charge you because they're not born here? Hell no.
They were well aware on the day that I moved in that I was bringing a child with a disability. It took 3 years to get my safety bars. Then they redid my bathroom after about the 15th year, and my bars were down for another year and a half. Finally, I got somebody to pick them up and carry them down to the office. Then they got them put back up. Wow. And we never had a ramp. The drains backed up, toilets stopped up, window broken, no heat. Pick one, had them all.
Y se me hace que es muy ridículo porque ellos no vienen aquí, solo nomás vienen a pintar encima. Tengo muchas cucarachas. Está feo el apartamento.
Last unit I lived in, I lived in that unit for 22 years, and I didn't have heat for like the last 15. Now, these places were perfectly serviceable, and they allowed them to run down. That's it, and that's all. There's nothing else that they can say about that.
These buildings are very challenging to fix, and that's really why new buildings are important, but also having respect and input from the community here on things that they want to see.
This is all a part of the privatization scheme. The Housing Authority uses these terrible conditions to justify selling the public housing to private companies. Living in such terrible conditions encourages people to move out on their own. But when they don't move out on their own, oftentimes they are forced out, or they are even tricked out of their homes.
I'm keeping my tent from when we went camping in that closet right there because I have a strong suspicion that I'm going to need that tent.
The fear of losing housing during the privatization process is justified. Even though HOPE SF promises 1-for-1, meaning everyone currently in public housing is guaranteed a new spot in the privatized housing, this doesn't always happen. In fact, many people get displaced during the privatization process.
The 1-in-1. So I lived in OC projects over on Eddy Street in Fillmore. There were more than 12 stories in these buildings, and they had hundreds of residents in them. And I honestly thought at the time, oh, this is a good thing. Tear them down, rebuild them. Everybody will get their place back if they want to come. And that's not the case.
Mayor Breed, the developers, and the new private management companies really want us to believe that the residents have played an important role in this privatization process, and that they've been participating at the highest levels.
There's no participation going on. You guys send me a letter telling me this is what it is. You tell me when you're going to have a meeting, and you go on about your day. Nobody calls me and says, Kathleen, can you read? Kathleen, were you able to read the letter we sent you? Did you actually know that we're having a meeting? Because I guarantee those meetings are half empty, and they wanted to stay that way. For 8 years, this has been the residents' plan. The residents have not planned to be evicted from their units, have them torn down and put back together however you see fit. I did not agree to move into a high rise, a low rise, have neighbors on top of me or up under me. I agreed to have my unit remodeled, have the tree that was blocking my view moved, and have that sewage line fixed. That's all I agreed to.
Y en los meetings en los cuales se nos dice que tenemos que aceptar a estas nuevas compañías que están llegando para hacer nuevos buildings. Pero sinceramente nadie quiere vivir ahí. Porque nosotros queremos nuestras viviendas. Nosotros queremos que nuestras viviendas sean remodeladas.
They just did it. That's the problem. They never showed us what they was going to put up because we would have been told them no. Like I said, when they first showed us the blueprints, we told them when they were saying Washington Drive, we're like, okay, we don't want that. So everybody stopped going to the meetings. Like, what the use is we going if y'all gonna keep saying y'all putting this shit up, you know? So they just put it up anyway.
Que quieren aumentar después las rentas, sabiendo que ahorita la gente no tiene trabajo, no tiene dinero. ¿Y qué hacen para que la gente no salga a protestar? La intimidan, diciéndole que, oh, está solo, o mandando gente a los meetings a decir, a intimidar. Pero no estamos solos. Eso es lo que yo les quería compartir hoy, que quieren desaparecer housing, el programa de housing, pero esto lo necesitamos las personas de bajos ingresos y no queremos que desaparezca, no queremos que nos quiten la ayuda, porque esta ayuda la necesitan nuestros hijos también.
They want residents to feel like they are alone. They want residents to feel like there's no point in putting up a fight. Intimidation through isolation is just one of their tactics. Another one of their tactics is not providing non-English speakers the paperwork that they need in the language that they speak and not providing interpreters.
Basically, we went to the meeting, I guess you can say. It was like a mini meeting.
Vamos a la oficina y nos maltratan. Y les decimos cosas y no hay nadie que nos hable español ni nada. Ellas solo lo que hacen es darse la vuelta y ya. Ahorita estoy esperando que me manden renta, pero no me han mandado el bill. Supuestamente porque no iba a firmar. Y vino una señora y me dijo de que si yo no iba a firmar, me iban a sacar de mi apartamento en 14 días antes si no pagaba, si no iba a firmar.
Y también quería decirles también que cuando fuimos a para llenar las aplicaciones, como yo tengo papeles, me dijeron que tenía que ser ciudadana americana para tener papeles y yo les dije que yo tenía nada más la residencia, pero dicen que no, que querían que vamos a ser americanos. Si no, también, pues, tenemos que ser, que no, nos tratan como mister, no sé cómo, mister, ¿verdad? Mister. Entonces, pues, lo que queremos que haya, pues, más unión, que nos ayuden, que no nos dejen, por eso estamos aquí, hablando para que haya más unión y que nos juntemos todas en unión y ay, no sé qué más.
One of the guys there, he knew. He just didn't want to tell us what was going on. And
queremos que nos ayuden porque ya aquí ya no, con todo esto que están haciendo de sección 8 y todos nos quieren prohibir hasta que tengamos pescados. Dicen que no puedo tener mis pescados, dicen que no puedo tener a mi perrito, no puedo tener nada. Ellos nos están quitando como la libertad.
they kind of did like an intimidation tactic where they would send out notices saying you have 14 days, but it was very broad and they weren't saying if it was eviction or not. So a lot of our neighbors were really scared and they weren't informed, and that's why we had to reach out for help because we were also scared. We weren't told anything. Basically, we were just given the letter saying to go to the meeting, but we didn't even know what it was for. We weren't sure if we were supposed to fill out any paperwork that day. It was very broad.
A las reuniones porque pues me siento más segura para así poder hablar todas reunidas, qué es lo que decía una, ya tenemos lo que decía ella, yo oíamos lo que decía, entonces ya tenemos más palabras para decir más cosas. Pero, yo como...
The housing authority, the developers, and the new private management companies want the transition from public to private to be as complicated for residents as possible. We know that the government is a terrible landlord, but we also know that private managers can be even worse. The city towers over in Oakland are a good example of how private management receiving government money leads to even less oversight. City Towers management receives full market rate rent for units that have mold, mice, roaches, constant plumbing issues, elevator issues, stairwells covered in urine, expired safety equipment, and the list goes on and on. And the same thing is happening all across the country. Public housing is disappearing, and private subsidized housing is popping up. And the differences between the two are pretty drastic.
There's a difference between dealing with a private entity. Their whole goal is making money. You're dealing with a public thing. They're used to dealing with people from the public. They're used to dealing with people that have issues that go beyond an ability to have a decent conversation. Housing is capable of dealing with those people because they are expecting to deal with those people. Whereas a private place told me no. And then what is the private people gonna do? Housing got it. If I don't have an income, I don't have to pay rent. If I say zero on my income, it's zero for my rent. What are the private people gonna do?
At one of the meetings was that what they planned on doing was enforcing every rule, to the letter of the law. And I know that's going to be the way that they get rid of a lot of people, just by enforcing those rules, because they never did it before.
The thing is, it's a community, and they don't want a community. You can't go down many streets in San Francisco anymore and see children outside playing because there's nowhere for them to play at in front of their houses. Over here, I know when the kids come home because they're outside my door yelling and screaming and running and making me appreciate what it feels like to hear children having fun in the background, not running through the halls, not sit down because the neighbors downstairs can hear you, not nobody under 18 can have a key to our building. Ain't that something? What? I gotta be 18 to get my mama's key, but I'm 14 and she go to work and so do my daddy. Now what? Now I'm in the streets because I gotta wait 4 or 5 hours for them to come home.
We are looking at paying PG&E, which we didn't do before. It was included in our rent. It's going to be a laundry situation for some people where they're going to have to use a coin laundry, and we all have our own washers and dryers. Then they have these big, brand new, shiny front loaders over there. Not for us, I'm certain.
This we're losing something that is way more valuable than what we think we gain.
Sunnydale and Potrero Hill were the last public housing in San Francisco, and now there's none left. But that doesn't mean that the fight is over.
The public housing is really the staying open of the Section 8 program. The minute the housing authorities closed down, they got action at closing down the Section 8 program. And that's the goal. As long as there's a housing authority open in the United States, there is a Section 8 program. Once they privatize all of these housing authorities, Section 8 is next. The more they take from us, the more they're going to keep taking, the less resources we're going to have.
Entonces yo quiero que se unan también más gente a esta causa, porque no hay muchas personas que vemos así y yo quiero que no tengan miedo, que salgan a hablar, porque es muy importante hacernos escuchar para que crezcamos y entre más somos, más nos van a escuchar. Entonces eso las quiero motivar a que no tengan miedo, a que se unan a nosotros para tener una vivienda mejor, para estar mejor, para estar tranquilos, sin que nos estén molestando, sin que nos estén viniendo a tocar la puerta, no vivir con miedo, no andar temiéndole a nadie, y pues eso es lo que yo quiero.
I like my projects. I like your projects. I like the projects. Not because I like the projects, I like the community.
We have a long road ahead of us. As more and more people struggle to pay rent, fuel their vehicles, feed their families, it can feel like an impossible battle, but it's not. Across the country, people are working together to build a movement strong enough to rise against the deadly tide of privatization. No politician, no nonprofit, no corporation is going to save us. Only we have that power, and though it may not be easy or simple to harness it, we know that it's the only thing that's going to liberate us. All power to the people.